Welcome to the Future of Ground Transportation podcast, where we discuss the exciting innovations that lie ahead for organizational ground transportation. Each episode, we cover topics tailored to those resolving transportation-related challenges and provide tips, tools, and trends that will inspire you to stay ahead of the curve. And now, here's your host, Daniel Perez.
Welcome to the Future of Ground Transportation. Today we have a special guest, Anna Brackenhofer. How we doing, Anna? Welcome to the podcast tonight.
I'm doing good. How are you? Thanks for having me tonight.
It's a pleasure. I'm doing great. It's the weather in Boston is getting way much better. It's about 50 Fahrenheit compared to where we were, a week or two at 10 Fahrenheit. So super excited to learn more about you and PowerOptions. So for all the listeners, buckle up. We have a great guest to educate us on what PowerOptions has to offer, the more education on like electrification, a roadmap to electrification incentives, and the work that PowerOptions do in the nonprofit sector. So let's give it a little bit of context on how did you get started at PowerOptions?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I joined PowerOptions about 2 years ago, and I'm an Energy Program Analyst, and I lead the fleet electrification services that we do at PowerOptions. And before that, I was working at GNA, now TRC companies, where I did consulting, a ton of grant writing for big corporations. And before that, I did a Master of Public Affairs at Brown University, and that's where I started my journey in the United States. And before that, I lived in Germany, where I grew up and did my undergrad in international relations and management. And that's how I started my policy / clean transportation journey. And I'm very excited to be working in this field.
Got it. Thank you. And out of all the careers, how did you choose the clean transportation sort of energy career?
Yeah, thank you. I think my journey is not a straight path, I'd say. As a child, I definitely wasn't interested in cars as many boys and my brother. But I was always interested in sustainability, and kind of growing up in Germany, that was always a big topic, especially with the Fridays for Future demonstrations happening all over Europe. And after my move to the United States for my master's degree, I had a professor who really inspired me. She did a lot in the climate space and taught me a lot. And that's how I realized that I wanted to do more in that field, and that we still have to do way more to get to zero emissions. And especially in the US, there's still a lot to do in the transportation field, especially because I think that the transportation sector accounts for about 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the US. And that's how I started my journey in this industry. And I got my first job in this field out in Santa Monica, and where I started to dive deeper into medium and heavy duty fleet electrification, learned a lot about trucks, about electric trucks, and learned a lot about the policies that are happening before then transitioning to the nonprofit world in that I'm working in right now at PowerOptions.
Awesome. Cool. So thank you for the context. Let's transition a little bit to PowerOptions. Tell us a little bit of what is it that PowerOptions offers? What is the main solutions and the main purpose?
Yeah, thank you. PowerOptions is a nonprofit and also a consortium. That means that it is a member-based organization. We are based out of Boston, but we are all over the Northeast. And we do serve members. So we are member-based organizations. We have about 500 members in the Northeast. And these members are either nonprofits or public entities, and we do everything energy related for them. So PowerOptions started about 25 years ago, and we did energy procurement for natural gas and electricity for our members. And then we expanded our offerings to solar analysis, building decarbonization, as well as fleet electrification. And that's where I come in, where we help our members decarbonize their fleet. We do fleet electrification planning, but also implementation. We work with different school districts, we work with hospitals, we work with museums, basically with every member that either has a fleet on their own or where they are serving others and want to install publicly accessible charging stations.
Got it. Thank you for the context. As far as the tell us a little bit about what are the biggest obstacles that you see and based on your experience so far for nonprofit organizations tapping into the electrification? Like, what is it? What are the main obstacles that you're seeing so far?
Yes, I think there are two main things that come to mind. I think the first one is awareness and training, but also just having the resources to be able to start this electrification process. So, one thing that I see, especially with the members, I'm working with a lot of members that are underserved communities, which are environmental justice communities or don't have access to clean air and at the same time don't have access to funding to fund these initiatives, especially with the prices for especially medium and heavy duty vehicles, including school buses and fire trucks, police vehicles, and so on. So, the issue that I'm seeing is that these organizations sometimes don't even have the funding to pay a sustainability coordinator or someone who leads these efforts, which makes it hard to even start this journey somewhere. So I think this is one of the major issues that I'm seeing where also PowerOptions steps in and tries to help out. And then another thing that I'm seeing, especially with public entities and nonprofits, is that there are a lot of stakeholders involved, and they should be involved early on. And might be different risks associated with different stakeholders. For example, one of the stakeholders is utility engagement, where sometimes there's just not enough capacity to even upgrade the grid in order to accommodate a certain number of charging stations or even deploy the electric vehicles. And then I think it's also just harder for them to even figure out the first steps because sometimes they don't have a fleet list or they don't know where to get the fleet data from. And sometimes the fleets are split up in different departments. So I think even the first step of getting the accurate data about the fleet from the different departments can be challenging, and then also the buy-in from different stakeholders. So to summarize, I think the two biggest issues that I'm seeing is first the funding, and then also just the awareness and the capability to support these efforts, and then also the stakeholder buy-in.
Awesome, awesome. You brought some really good points, especially funding and pricing. So what I seen with over 100 buses that we operate in New York and Massachusetts, or just all over the Northeast, including Connecticut and New Jersey, is the price. There's the cost of entry. Your average legislative, we picked an average price point of $100,000 per bus. An electrical vehicle is about 300 to half $500,000. How can companies sort of overcome those challenges? Because I seen that every time that we provide a proposal and the price is such a big difference of a magnitude, the clients tend to, you know, right away raise their eyebrows and then they go back to your um, regular diesel or your regular diesel or gasoline vehicles. So like how are you guys being able to sort of help members sort of overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so I think before I get into that, I also want to point out the benefits of these electric vehicles, which is also part of why we're doing the work that we're doing. And I think beyond the finances, one big aspect are the air quality or environmental benefits, where especially when we're working with school districts, these especially for the children who are sitting on these school buses, electric school bus is so much cleaner than a diesel school bus, and also helps reduce asthma in a lot of different communities, especially some of these underserved communities that I was talking about. So I think this is one thing to always keep in mind aside from the price of these vehicles. But yes, it is still a huge investment to invest in electric vehicles, especially for medium as well as heavy duty vehicles. And how we are overcoming this challenge is, I think the first one is to look at all the incentives that are out there, especially for some of the public entities. They can still take advantage of some of the tax credits that are available. It might not be available in the future, but they can take advantage of these tax credits through direct pay. And then I also always try to point out other incentives, for example, the Clean School Bus program, but then also the DERA program. And especially here in the Northeast states, such as Massachusetts, Maine, Rhode Island, they all have state programs that also fund a portion of the vehicle. So if you add up all these different incentives, then you could get to parity with a diesel vehicle, including also heavy duty and medium duty. Why we also see that, especially for light duty vehicles with these incentives, the vehicles are already at parity. And then I think what's also important to keep in mind that we are looking at new vehicles. So you always have to compare kind of a new electric diesel bus with a new electric school bus when you're thinking about this. And then just, also trying to be realistic about it. So that's why when we are developing these fleet roadmaps, we always recommend to start with the light duty vehicles and then later on move to medium and heavy duty vehicles, as we're expecting that, or as I'm expecting that there will be more competition in the market and that the price will go down over time, similar to what we've been seeing with light-duty electric vehicles already.
That's very well said, and I appreciate the context. So tell us a little bit about heavy duty vehicles. Again, from PowerOptions. What are your sort of either awareness, information when it comes to heavy duty vehicles? If you could just sort of elaborate a little bit on I don't know if it's tax credits, if it's state programs, partners that you work with when it comes to, creating fleet roadmaps for heavy duty vehicles.
Yeah, sure. So talking about heavy duty vehicles, I would say that most of our members do have heavy duty vehicles as part of their fleet. So either we're talking about fire trucks, or we're talking about dump trucks, or class 7 or 8 trucks. And then also we have a lot of members that are school districts that are working with school buses. So I would say especially how we consider these vehicles in our fleet roadmaps is that we look at the options that are out there, but we also flag that these options at the moment are limited, but we're expecting the price to go down over time. That's why usually our roadmaps go out until 2050. And then we do recommend to wait for at least a couple of years before transitioning the heavy duty vehicles. And especially since I think when you're just starting out, you should start with a few vehicles instead of transitioning your whole fleet at the same time. And then you can kind of get that experience. How does it work? How do I have to charge the vehicle? Where do I put the charging stations? And then later on in the process, you can think about electrifying your whole fleet and thinking about more, let's say, complicated vehicles in that sense. For example, when we're talking about fire trucks, they have to be operational 24/7. So you do want to make sure that you do have the necessary grid capability to support DC/FC charging stations for these types of vehicles. And talking about incentives, then I can point out a few programs. There are a few on a federal level, but then on a state level, for example, in Massachusetts, there's the More EV Trucks program, which funds, I think, up to $90,000 per heavy duty truck. And then there are also some other advisory service programs to, for example, the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center for deployment for some of these vehicles. And some are only focused on school buses, some are focused on also other types of heavy duty vehicles. And then you also always want to look at your local utility and see what types of programs they have available aside from purchasing the vehicles, you also want to look into the utility for charging stations and how you could help to finance that as well.
Got it. Thank you, Anna. So you mentioned, just so I could recap, so you mentioned there's federal grants up to $90,000 for heavy duty vehicles.
That's the More EV. That's the Massachusetts program. That's the More EV program.
The more EV,
Yeah, MOR minus EV.
MOR, okay. And then you mentioned the utilities to double check with on the utility side, and then you mentioned for school buses, there's other programs
Yes.
where
So
listeners go to find out more about those programs.
yes. So for listeners who have vehicles in Massachusetts, I would check MassCC, the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center website. They do have a deployment program for school buses, but they also have a fleet advisory program. There's no dollar value attached to the fleet advisory program, but it helps you kind of get started with your fleet electrification journey. And these types of roadmaps also can help you to apply to other funding sources. Then another program that we've been seeing on a federal level is the Clean School Bus program from EPA. However, as of now, I'm not sure if this program will still be available in the future. And then another program is also the DERA program, which is either open on a federal or state level. It's currently open on a state level in Massachusetts, which closes April 7. And this helps mitigate the costs between purchasing a new, replacing a current diesel vehicle with an electric vehicle.
And it's called DERA.
DERA, yes, DERA. It's the Diesel Emission Reduction Act program. And Massachusetts still has some funding available. Some other states, so this program is nationwide. Other states might have run out of funding. Some might still have funding left. And sometimes it also opens up on a national level, however, on a federal level, but I'm not sure if that will still be the case moving forward.
Got it. And then can you elaborate a little bit more on the school buses? What is what is available with school buses, whether it's with electrical vehicles, grants, charging stations? I know that there's probably a lot to talk about school buses, but at a high level, like what do you see in the school bus sector
Yeah, just in terms of incentives or in general, what's
in
happening?
general, including incentives will be great.
Yeah. So let me start with the incentives for school buses. So we do have the Clean School Bus program on a federal level, which is the EPA program. It has been open for the past 5 years. And then there was also the Clean Heavy Duty Vehicles Grant, which also included school buses. And the DERA program, the Diesel Emission Reduction Acts program, also covers school buses in Massachusetts. And then the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center also has a deployment program as well as an advisory program specifically for school districts. And then for example, in Massachusetts, the More EV program also covers school buses. And in general, for school buses, what I'm seeing is that there are different approaches to school bus electrification. In general, I guess working in the Northeast, most of our members are looking into electrifying their school bus fleet. However, all of them are in very different stages. So some of them already have um, electrified half of their fleet or even more, and some of them are just now starting out to think about school bus electrification. And I think one important aspect about school districts in the US is that some of them do work with third-party operators. So that means that they contract out their school buses. So they pay a fee to the operator, and the operator, they house the buses, they have the drivers, they maintain the buses. And some of these providers are very proactive in fleet electrification, and others are more reluctant. So I think it really kind of depends on what the school district is looking for, but also for the future, because most of these contracts do run out after 5 years. And especially when you're transitioning to electric vehicles, you do want to make sure that you you can stick to a certain provider for potentially longer than 5 years, just because you want to consider the installation of the infrastructure and also the costs of the vehicles.
Got it. And just for context again, Power Options is mainly covering the Northeast region. So a lot of the things that we discuss here applies across the Northeast region, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So Power Options is based out of Boston, and our members, our 500 members, are in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Maine.
Got it. Okay. Perfect. And then talk to us a little bit of mobile charging stations. So I know obviously this is a critical component on that roadmap to electrification. So tell us a little bit about the mobile charging stations at a high level as well.
Yeah, so we haven't seen mobile charging stations being deployed as much, but I do recommend it as a great option, especially when we're seeing that the grid doesn't have enough capacity or when we're seeing a significant delay in utility upgrades. So I think if you put an application today with Eversource or National Grid in Massachusetts, it can take up to 18 months. In order to upgrade your site. So mobile charging stations are a good solution to kind of bridge the gap in between. And also to, because I think at the end of the day, it's a chicken and egg problem. You want to ask yourself, okay, do I buy the charging station first or do I buy the electric vehicle first? And what you don't want to have happen, and what I have seen with some of our members, is that the buses are just sitting there and they can't be charged because the infrastructure isn't ready. So especially in these cases, I do think mobile charging stations can be a great solution. But of course, it's also in these cases important to run the numbers and make sure that this makes sense financially.
Got it. And you said that the typical turnaround to get the charging station is about 12 to 18 months by the time that someone acquires the charging station and get it to work.
Not to get the charging station, but to get the utility to upgrade the site. So let's say the site where you want to install the charging stations doesn't have enough grid capacity from the utility, and the utility has to make these upgrades. The utility upgrades behind the meter can take up to 18 months.
Wow. Okay, so especially for large fleets, um, if they don't have enough power from the grid, then the utility companies need to come in and actually update the site in order to fulfill the electricity capacity that is required for those buses, and it could take
Yeah.
anywhere from 12 to 18 months.
Yes, that's correct. So that's something important to keep in mind. And what we do in our fleet roadmaps and our approach is, especially for larger fleets, to recommend a staged approach. So you want to take advantage of the low-hanging fruit, the charging stations that you can put in without needing any utility side upgrades. So you do want to start with that, and then later on move to a second or third phase for full fleet electrification in order to accommodate all the chargers you need for full fleet electrification. But in general, we always recommend to start with a few vehicles first, and then slowly over the next years have a plan of how to fully electrify your school bus fleet or your public entity fleet, public
Got it.
fleet.
Thank you, Anna. And you mentioned a stage. Is that the same thing as the mobile charging stations, or?
I'm just recommending a staged approach. So we usually in our roadmaps recommend a horizon of over 5 to 15 years, depending on the fleet size. So, for example, if a member wants 50 charging stations, then we don't recommend to do that all at once, but we do recommend to start with 25 and then add the remaining 25 a few years later.
Got it. And is there any incentives, state programs that folks and listeners could learn more about for charging stations? Is there any sort of, what comes to your top of mind when it comes to grants and incentives for us
Yeah.
for charging stations?
Yeah, so here, especially in so some of these programs that are out there, for example, the DERA program or the Clean School Bus program, they do fund both. So usually they fund the vehicle itself as well as the associated infrastructure. But then specifically talking about Massachusetts, we do have the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center again. They do have a lot of different programs out there. They actually do have a mobile charging station program, I think, out there as well. So they do a lot of innovative programs in the space. And then also, yet again, I would also always contact your local utility to see what type of programs they have out there. So it really depends on if it's a public charging station or are you in an environmental justice community, how much funding you can get. And sometimes the utilities run out of funding, so that's something I would recommend to just talk to your local utility, talk to your utility representative to figure out what's currently available. And then also, I think what's also important is to maybe look at off-peak charging incentives. So that means that if you plug in your vehicle at a certain time when no one else is charging, for example, at off-peak hours, then you might get some financial incentive for that.
Totally, totally. Thank you, Anna. And as far as the workforce training, I know that this is a big obstacle for a lot of companies too, especially for large fleets, educating their mechanics or technicians how to navigate the ropes when it comes to electrical vehicles as well as the mobile charging stations. How is Power Options sort of working with the workforce to make sure that they adapt to the new wave of electrification?
Yeah, so we usually work with partners on that. So we work with electricians. They would then come in and talk to the local electricians and help them. But we also do research on kind of available trainings that are available to our members depending on where they are located. Since we do serve a bunch of different states, it really depends on where the member is located and what type of training is out there and what type of incentives are out there for the training. Unfortunately, I don't see as many programs as I would like to see in that space yet. So I think there's still a lot of growth that needs to happen. But yet, on the other hand, I'm also do seeing that there is training happening and there are more people who know how to take care of the charging stations. And I think that some of our members, they also outsource that part. So where you have to kind of think about, am I going to train my own technicians or am I going to outsource that part and work with people who are already trained? And then also for that, kind of figuring out what's the best approach. But I think in general, with moving to electric vehicles and installing charging stations, it's important to kind of think about, do I want to own the charging station? Do I want to own it myself? Do I want to own the vehicle? Do I want to lease it? There are so many new components out there that fleets have to consider, which is new. But yeah, there are also a lot of solutions out there. And yeah, hopefully I'll see more programs in that space in the future.
Well, Anna, you did a phenomenal job sort of breaking down the context for the roadmap on electrification. Anything else that Power Options offers that we didn't cover that you like to cover?
Yeah, so we do a lot of things at Power Options for our members. So whatever they need in their electrification journey, we're trying to help them. That's also our mission, to help them decarbonize. So we do building decarbonization as well. And then we also we do solar, we do battery storage, we do electric vehicle deployment. And then for school buses, we also have a fleet electrification as a service program. And then we also have Project Navigator, where we do help our members to figure out all these different incentives, not only for electric vehicles and charging stations, but also for heat pumps and for other energy efficiency projects.
That is awesome. All right, let's transition a little bit to the end of the episode. What is the best business advice you ever gotten throughout your journey?
Yeah, I think the best business advice is to not be afraid to speak up, even if you think you have nothing interesting to say or you're not experienced in that field or you're too young. That doesn't count. That doesn't matter. Always speak up because people like to listen, and everyone can learn from anyone. So I think that's the best business advice that I've gotten is to don't be afraid to speak up, and that's also what I would like to share with others as well.
100%, Anna. That is so well said. A lot of times I said that the most simple things in life are the ones that we normally don't do. And just even speaking up, I learned the hard way of being in a couple of boards, and I just learned to speak up because there sometimes it could be so many limited self beliefs that prevent us to either be the best version of ourselves or to actually bring value to that conversation. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And to conclude, what is the best business recommendation that you will normally recommend to the listeners that will have probably that had the best impact on you so far?
Yeah, just business advice in general.
Correct.
Yeah, just to talk to people, to always learn, and to to always be open to new experiences and say yes to life.
Got it. And your top favorite book?
My favorite book that I read many times is called Never Split the Difference: Negotiating as If Your Life Depends on It. That's a book from an FBI negotiator. So he doesn't apply the Harvard approach to negotiation, but comes from the field and has a different approach on how to get things done, and especially for people who have to negotiate contracts, this has been proven very useful, but also just in day-to-day negotiations. This has been a great book, so I recommend everyone to read it.
Got it. Thank you, Anna. Well, Anna, again, thank you very much for being so gracious with your time, for sharing so much wisdom, for educating a lot of transportation operators, transit agencies, and a lot of nonprofit agencies as well in within our audience. You did a phenomenal job. So just want to thank you for your time. How can listeners connect with Power Options and with yourself?
Yes, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Anna Brackenhofer. It's ANNABRACKENHOFER. And then you can also find me on the Open Door Climate Directory. That's a directory for people who are open to talk about their careers and their journey in fleet electrification and sustainability in general. And then you can also connect with us on poweroptions.org if you want to learn more about the work that we do.
Perfect. Again, Anna, thank you so much for sharing all your time. Phenomenal job. And for all the listeners, again, I hope you found this episode valuable and stay tuned for the next episode. You guys have a great day. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed the episode and got some valuable insights. If you're curious to learn more, head over to the resource website at dpvtransportation.com, where we got a ton of useful resources and tools for you to stay ahead of the game. And before we wrap it up, I want to invite you to book a free gas emission consultation or a consultation about your ground transportation program with us. Just register on our website is a fantastic way to see how your fleet is doing or how your overall program could be improved. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you next time on the future of ground transportation. Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to the future of ground transportation. We appreciate you coming along for the ride. If you found value in this episode and want to hear more, please make sure to subscribe to the show.